Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining our home care hangout. Estate planning is for everyone. My name is Sarah Christ, and I'm a care consultant with Live Home, a national geriatric care management company. We provide caregiving services, which helps keep the seniors safe in their home, and also we take into consideration the psychosocial aspect of these individuals' lives, because it's not good enough to just exist. We want to make sure that they're thriving until the end. And through the care management, we have social workers and RNs on staff who will do an assessment, create a plan of care, and then help the caregivers implement that plan of care. Today, we have the following panelists with us: Sheldon Goldman, who's a senior wealth advisor with Hoyle Cohen; Rod Hatley, an estate planning attorney with Chokar Law Group; and Marcia Campbell with a professional corporation. So the topic today is estate planning for everyone. If you have children or elderly parents, what about a savings or a home? If you answered yes to any of these, here's another question for you. Do you have an estate plan in place? While you may think that estate planning only applies to wealthy individuals with millions in assets who live on, well, estates, think again. Plain and simple, estate planning helps protect your family in the event that something bad happens to you. And yet, 55% of Americans don't even have a last will, leaving them vulnerable to costly court fees and legal battles. But even though it's predicated on incapacitation or death, estate planning doesn't have to be morbid. In fact, it can actually be life-affirming, because the process will allow you to take a closer look at the people you most care about in life and ensure their future happiness. Today, we're hoping to answer the following questions for you. What is estate planning? What does an estate exist of? Why should older adults have a proper estate plan in place? Wills, trusts, estate plans, how do you determine what an individual needs? What are the benefits of having a will? Why is it important to update your will? And how often should you update their will? What are the benefits of having a trust? What are the consequences if someone doesn't do adequate estate planning? What are some key estate planning mistakes to avoid? What are some common misconceptions about estate planning? What sort of professionals should be involved in the estate planning process? Do you have any advice for finding a proper estate attorney? My professionals today on the panel will be able to answer that. And do you have any tips or advice for those in estate planning? So let's begin by introducing you to my first panelist today, Sheldon Goldman. Sheldon, why don't you tell us what your position is with Hoyle Cohen?
I am a senior wealth advisor at Hoyle Cohen. We're a financial planning-centric registered investment advisory firm here in San Diego with about $800 million under assets. And I help families and individuals discover the holes in their plan, the gaps in their plan, and I tie up the loose ends. And you can see how that could relate to estate planning, which is one of the areas that we get clear on. I also help families and individuals retire on their own terms.
Thank you very much, Sheldon. Okay, moving on to Rod Hatley with Chokar Law Group. Rod, what is your role at the firm?
I'm a partner with the Chokar Law Group, and primarily we're an asset preservation, I should say an asset protection and wealth preservation law firm. And really what that means in plain English is that we help clients plan their estates, but we always look at estate planning through the lens, if you will, of asset protection. Our opinion is that the best estate planning in the world is really useless if there's nothing left to pass on. So we're estate planning attorneys, but we always come from an asset protection perspective. And even if it's a simple estate, we can build into that plan asset protection features so that there's bloodline protection, so that children aren't unintentionally disinherited if there's a death of one spouse and then a subsequent remarriage. And then, of course, when the children may receive whatever's coming to them, or whoever the beneficiaries are, those are protected in such a way that they can always have access to the assets, but they can't lose them if there's a later lawsuit or perhaps a divorcing spouse.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Now moving on to Marcia. Tell us about your practice, a professional corporation, and your role there.
Well, I'm a CPA in inland Southern California, and my practice, I'm not your normal CPA. My practice is divided into 4 niches. So I specialize in working with seniors, and may do something as simple as paying their bills all the way over to the other end of the spectrum where I'm their trustee or their power of attorney. I do taxes for individuals and probate estates and trusts. I also act as trustee in other capacities, as in guardianships, conservatorships. Some of my clients have no idea of who I am. They're in a facility, they have dementia, but I'm there managing their money and making sure that everything is going well. And the 4th area that I work in is court accountings. That's when the beneficiaries are suing the trustees, and the probate court wants to see what kind of transactions happened in their format, and so I'm able to do that. So those are the 4 areas of my practice.
Thank you very much, Marcia. So Sheldon, why don't you share with us, from the perspective of a wealth manager, what is estate planning?
Wow, there's a lot to say. So to narrow the scope, what I don't want to do is focus on the legal language and the legal attributes of a will and a trust. Mr. Hadley can do that well. I'd like to focus on what I think we can all relate to, which is we should all be able to have our intentions codified, which means asking the right questions of yourself in conversation with your loved ones. What is it that you want? And forget about money for a minute. Many of us don't think of ourselves as rich, therefore we don't think of a trust and a will as applicable to our situation. But who's going to take care of your kids, if something happens to you? And how much of what you do have it should go to your kids? How much should go to charity? Which charities? Who gets the family belongings? Do kids get money up front or over time? And what about the grandkids? And who writes the checks if you become incapacitated? And then what about that special needs child or that irresponsible child who, with respect to money, or that child who abuses drugs or alcohol? So estate planning, from my perspective, starts with a conversation, and it's important to be clear on what your intentions are, and then it's the attorney's job to help further that process, and then to translate it into legal words that we can relate to, that accurately reflects what our values are, what it is that we want for ourselves and our family.
Thank you very much, Sheldon. That's why I always have confidence in saying that Hoyle Cohen truly goes with the relationship first. The fact that you guys are willing to have those very in-depth conversations, it makes a difference for sure. So Rod, your question, wills, trusts, estate plans, how do you determine what exactly an individual needs?
Well, I think Sheldon kind of hit on the point by saying that when you sit down with your client, obviously you want to have a conversation, and you need to understand what's important to the clients, because that's really going to drive what the planning is. Now, as an attorney here in Southern California and San Diego, if somebody owns real property, I'm going to really strongly recommend that they have a trust in place. And even if they didn't have real property, as we get older as a society, it's likely that we may have a period of incapacity, possibly in a nursing home care. Estate planning is really about, as Sheldon talked about, is really about planning for not just death, but what happens if I became mentally incapacitated? Maybe driving home tonight, I get into a car wreck, and now I'm incompetent, I can't manage my affairs. At some point, someone's going to need my signature. So the way to do that is to put me in front of the probate court judge downtown and ask, have someone be appointed to be my conservator. And what is a conservator? Really nothing more than a guardian for a grown person. So typically when we do estate planning for our clients, we'll recommend strongly that they have a living trust. And the only time we wouldn't do that is if maybe it's a single person, they don't have a lot of assets, they don't own real property, but they do want to have a chance to say, well, when something happens to me, when I'm out of the picture forever, this is how I want things to go. But understand, a will, a standalone will, really doesn't apply until you die. So a living trust, you do it while you're alive, and it provides for your later incapacity, if that should happen, or one day when you're gone. It allows the assets that are owned by the trust to avoid probate. So to answer your question, it'll depend on who the client is, what the concerns are, and then that really drives whether we go with a standalone will, which is in a minority of cases, or more typically we'll do a living trust with an ancillary document that's a pour-over will, so it catches any asset that's owned by the trust maker when he or she dies and sends it over to their trust. But does that help?
Yes, Rod, that does help. Thank you for your answer. For our audience, please define what real property is. Okay,
and that's a lawyer mistake I made. Real property is your home, or it might be a rental property, any property that you own. Now, we'll draw the distinction very quickly. Real property is your home, it might be a rental property, as opposed to tangible personal property like your car, it could be your refrigerator. Those kinds of assets, those are personal, those are tangible assets. Real property is land, your home, rental properties, that sort of thing.
Thank you very much for that clarification. Now, Marcia, what are some of the unusual things you should put into your estate plan? The things that people don't typically think about.
Well, normally when somebody's looking for estate planning, they are thinking about their house, their rentals, their bank accounts, their brokerage statements or brokerage accounts, and what happens to all of that. And that, you know, that needs the planning. However, there are other things. For instance, I know we're dealing mostly with seniors, but if you have children, Sheldon mentioned kids, but there's guardianships that have to be set up. And who do you get to set those up? Who's going to take care of the kids? And then also, who's going to take care of the money? The money that you have left, that you have in an insurance policy, that you have in your estate, is that going to be handled by the same people that are taking care of the kids? Are you going to have a trust for that portion? And how is that going to work between the trustee and the people taking care of the kids? Special needs trusts are something that I'm seeing more of. Either kids that are born with problems, or there's a malpractice suit, or as Rod talked about, having an accident and all of a sudden somebody's, you know, struggling with a traumatic brain injury. The special needs trusts are very important, and I see a lot of grandparents doing that for kids. Long-term care is really important. My oldest client is 103. She's really sweet. She's got her act together. Her body's falling apart a bit, but people are living longer. And so people are looking at that long-term care. Do I have enough assets to be able to support myself as I get older? Do I need an insurance policy for that? Do I need a life insurance policy that has that as a side benefit? What am I going to do? How am I going to take care of that? What are the costs going to be? And then just some fun things. Rod mentioned personal items. I have one client whose wife was an artist. He doesn't want his wife's art, to just go and be in an estate sale. So we're working with him as to which piece goes to which child or which friend. And you can do that with personal collections too. You know, other artwork, a lot of collectibles. How about a wine collection? We were talking earlier about a friend of ours called Mark who has a wine cellar. And if he has something like that, does he want it to go to the son-in-law who's just going to drink it like beer? Or does he want it to go to somebody who would appreciate it, take care of it, enjoy it? So those are kind of unusual type things. Just two others. How about pets? Do you have a pet? What happens to that pet? Do you want a pet protection trust? I mean, some people go absolutely crazy, leave $4 million to their dog. What's going to happen to the pet? Lastly, I think it's really important. Family history is important, and I'm trying to work very hard with my clients to put down that history, do videotapes, put the names on the back of the pictures of who the people were, what the activity was. I think that's something that's happening more now, especially on the internet where you can find websites and things. So that's some of the unusual things.
Marcia, I think that the level of thoughtfulness that you're bringing to these conversations is beautiful, primarily from the perspective of Live Home and what we do with our clients. For instance, the family history and putting the names on the pictures, those are all activities where what we do through the caregiving and the care management could be facilitated, and that's a quality of life type activity, but it's really refreshing to know that you're bringing that depth to how you're dealing with your clients, so thank you. Moving back to Sheldon, what are the benefits of having a will and trust in place?
Well, there are many benefits, and one of the themes I'm hearing today is that irrespective of whether you have assets, whether you're renting and you have very little in the bank, there are benefits of having a will and trust in place. And so there are clearly legal benefits to having that will and trust, but once again, I want to focus on the non-legal attributes of getting a plan. So, most people don't have a will and trust, and we should all ask ourselves why. And I really want to speak to those people. So, and many people who do have a will and trust in place, they don't even understand them, or they don't feel connected to it. And if they do, they often don't title that property in the name of the trust, which is an implementation issue. So people need to commit to and make decisions that they have an emotional attachment to in order for it to be successful. And they fear that. I've heard many people say that they'll be dead. What do I care? I mean, I had a guy in this office tell me, I'll just take my canoe out with a bottle of vodka. I mean, that is not an estate plan. People to feel connected to the issues and to want to address them is key. So I tell stories about how families fell apart after death due to disputes and ill feelings. The oldest child comes into the house and takes the jewelry and whatever those issues are. So preserving family unity and family harmony is that emotional component that will likely get people to act. So having a will and trust in place, I characterize it as just good housekeeping. It increases people's confidence. And there's enough fear and anxiety among our community, and especially in our aged population, that anything that gives them some peace of mind and a feeling of security is a very good thing.
Thank you, Sheldon. Obviously, there's all the complex reasons why people need to have these in place, but I'm really valuing the simplicity that we're bringing to this, the conversations and the protection and those sorts of things. I think that people can really identify with those reasons. So, Rod, so let's say you don't do this planning. What are the consequences if someone doesn't have the proper estate plan in place?
Okay, well, I'll speak from personal experience. In my own situation, my father was very ill when he died in 1992, and Dad had a simple will. But wills go through probate. In our case, it took 7 years to get through probate back where I'm from, which is in Memphis, Tennessee. So having a plan in place is critical, because if you don't have a will or any kind of planning, that's what we call intestate. And so you're going to go through probate, and that's time consuming, it's expensive, and it's a matter of public record. And even if you do have a will, same idea. It's going to go through probate, it's time consuming, it's expensive, and a matter of public record. So the idea is to try to get out ahead of this, especially as we talked about earlier. If I get into a bad car wreck tonight on the way home and I'm incapacitated mentally, well, if I didn't have any estate planning in place, I'm going through a conservatorship at some point, because someone's going to need my signature. But if I have done my planning, and trust me, I have, I don't want to have to go through the conservatorship process. I want to make sure that everything is handled outside of the court, and that people I trust to take care of me and to take care of my assets will be the ones that I have step up to the plate, as opposed to someone being appointed by the probate court. So probate, there's nothing wrong with probate inherently, but just know that it's, we used to say it takes about 12 to 16 months, and with the court shutdowns these days in California at least, it may be upwards of 18 to 24 months or longer, or in my father's case, 7 years. So that can all be avoided by doing the prior planning, and even if someone has a very simple and modest estate, a will can be very valuable, because now you get to say, well, who gets my stuff after we pay off all my creditors, etc. And I always like to ask questions. I always like to ask this question of clients: how many financially responsible 18-year-olds do you know? And I bet Sheldon has probably never met one. So in any event, the idea is that we want to make sure that we avoid a kind of money going to a beneficiary before he or she should receive it, and just avoid the expense and delay and publicity of a probate. And that's why I think trust-centered planning can really be valuable, not only because we avoid probate, but also we avoid the conservatorship too. So these are all great reasons, and these are the things that I think drive why we would want to have an estate plan in place for clients who would like to have that conversation.
Thank you, Rod. Now, viewers, I know it appears as though we're using a lot of fear, but the truth is what Rod is describing is reality, and so the intent is to really save you a lot of headache and heartache, so that way you can really deal with the emotional aspects of the situation when you lose a loved one, or when you're the person, you want to make sure that your family members don't have to deal with this heartache and the headache. So it comes from a place of wanting to protect. Moving back to Marcia now, what are some of the problems in doing an estate plan now that you see?
Well, as some of the other conversations came out, people don't want to do planning now. Sometimes they are afraid that if they do the planning now, they're going to die tomorrow or something like that. Some of them just don't want to make a commitment. They don't want to make those decisions. My concept is it's much better to do some kind of planning now than not do anything, because then, like Rod said, you end up in probate court or you get unintended consequences. So nobody has a crystal ball. I haven't found that yet. I've been looking but can't find it. But you need to do the planning, and then you need to do the reviewing, because people change, people move out of the area, finances change, there's all kinds of change in the world. That's the only thing that's guaranteed in life, besides death, is change. It's going to happen.
Yeah.
And I think the relationships are really important. People, you might have a best friend today, and tomorrow that best friend is gone. So again, more changes, divorces, deaths, births. An in-law who comes in with 2 or 3 kids. What's going to happen to those kids? Are you going to separate them, or are you going to include them in your estate plan? So again, there's no guarantee of what's going to happen in the future. There's no crystal ball to look at. But the planning needs to get done, and it needs to get done now.
Thank you, Marcia. So this next question, we'll start with Sheldon answering it, but I want to open this question up to all of the panelists, because I'm a big fan of communication, and the thing is, what we know about people is one communication style may work for someone and it may not work for another person. So you really have to take into consideration what is the right approach. And so Sheldon, beginning with you, how can one open the doors of discussing estate planning before there are family issues?
To start, you need to open the door. You need to start by asking the right questions early in the relationship. So, again, from our perspective and in my practice here, we do have a process, and it's to be clear on that client's mission, their vision, their values, and goals. A higher level of discovery process a process that is designed to move them through to decisions, which starts by understanding what the issues are and why those are issues for the client. And it's critical to have these conversations before solutions are recommended. So it's conversational. And it's that point, again, where everybody listening could be put into their own driver's seat, because it starts with your intentions. What is it that you want for your life? And by going through your own discovery process, you're going to be better served. So if you alter the relationship, you alter the results.
Thank you, Sheldon. From your experience, is there any certain verbiage or phrases that you have found to be most effective when opening people up to the idea of having to do this? Stories,
Something they can relate to, something they have an emotional attachment to. Any person who has lived through having their mother or father go through assisted living and Sarah, you can relate to this, is going to be more apt or likely to enter into long-term care planning. Anyone who's seen their parents or a loved one have issues with respect to their own estate plan, with loss or incapacitation, is going to relate to those issues and have an emotional attachment to it. And as a result, they're going to be invested in the process, and they're going to act. So if the focus is on, you can't go to probate and intestate, if it's all about legal jargon, you're going to lose people, and they're not going to act. So it's got to be relatable to what's going on in their lives, because everybody essentially needs their own crafted approach to estate planning, and ultimately it's the conversation. But that conversation, I'm not in the meetings business, I'm in the decision-making business. So conversations are wonderful. It's got to translate into action at some point.
Thank you, Sheldon. Thank you very much. Rod, so the same question for you. Would you like me to repeat it?
Yeah, go ahead, because I enjoyed Sheldon's answer, but help me get reoriented as to what the question is, please.
You got it. So how can an advisor or a loved one open the doors of discussing estate planning before there are family issues? So how can you have that conversation with your clients, or how can adult children have this conversation with their parents to prevent any family issues? How do you open the door?
Oh, wow. That's... I think Sheldon probably hit the nail on the head. I mean, you've got to start. I mean, I think stories sell. I mean, as a professional advisor, I mean, let's say someone comes in to see me. My goal is to educate them. I try to leave the legalese outside of the meeting. I mean, I try to speak into their listening and just understand, okay, what brought you in here? What's keeping you awake at night? What are the concerns that you have, both for yourselves and for the people you care about, maybe their children, grandchildren, that sort of thing. I would also suggest if someone has a parent who probably should be doing some planning, and maybe the parent, because we're all scared of something, and I think death and dying are difficult concepts for people to kind of get their arms around. It may just be as simple as having a conversation with mom or dad and saying, look, you know what, I really care about you, and I'm concerned that you haven't done enough planning, and, I mean, not that I'm concerned, I mean, I don't care what you leave me, but I want to make sure that, you leave things the way you want to leave things, and if you don't do any planning, or if you don't do enough additional planning, that may not be the case. And so that might be a way to start a conversation with an elderly parent to try to get them to understand, gosh, and I know some good people, they would be happy to meet with us on a complimentary basis and understand what your concerns are, what your goals are, and then, as I think Sheldon so wisely said, translate that into action, so that it's not just a happy conversation, but it really results in meaningful progress toward the goal, which is to have the proper planning in place.
I really like those two collaborative answers because it very much is a conversation of mom and dad, what are your wishes? What do you want? We want to be able to honor what you want, but we can't do that if we don't know what you want. So Marcia, the same question for you. How is it that you've gone about opening the door to these discussions?
Well, two different things. If you're talking about family, sometimes the family dynamics get to be too big for people to break through. So one of the things I suggest is that they bring in, or they do meet with an attorney or, another. I like working with a team, so it usually has an attorney and a financial person and, Live Home. I usually use Live Home a lot. Sometimes having that team or an additional person who is not connected to the family helps break up those barriers so that we can start talking about it. And then I'm a natural listener, so my questions are kind of leading, what are you looking for? What, like Rod said, what's going to keep you up late at night? And then from there, we can start making choices. The other thing is that the end of that question is talking about the family problems afterwards. And I try bringing in family as we're going along. So it might be a family meeting saying, okay, this is what's happening. We just don't want you to change it. You're not going to change it, but this is what's happening so that you have some idea. And that way, especially if you have siblings that are fighting or, there's antagonism there, sometimes it helps if the communication's there.
Marcia, do you find that when you are involving the entire family from the get-go that it decreases the chance that you're going to have a lot of negative family dynamics in the end because everybody's on the same page from the start and everybody is vested in what the plan is?
That is always my goal, but each family is different. And sometimes you just do the best that you can. Family dynamics amaze me, but you have activities and the dynamics from when they were 5 years old and they're still there now and they're 60 years old. So, but that's my goal, is to make everybody happy and get everybody vested so that everybody works together for mom and dad.
Thank you. So I'm going to keep it on you for the present moment. Your next question is, what kinds of issues do you see with estate plans after the person dies?
Okay. I do some trust administration. I do tax returns for trusts. I am a trustee. And then I also do these court accounting. So I'm in court a lot with issues of trusts and trustees. So I'm going to say my biggest thing is the trustees. They don't know. Sometimes they don't have any idea of what they're supposed to be doing. It's an appointment, an honor for the oldest child. They have no clue. Sometimes they don't know that they should call an attorney and say, what do I do now that mom or dad has died? Sometimes they feel that it's their money. So they start commingling money. They start using it for themselves. They may just have money issues, and so they just borrow money from the trust. But all of a sudden, there's money's disappearing, assets are disappearing. I had one trustee whose mother died, left her the trustee. She's an attorney, but she practiced in a different area. So she took all of the mail for 2 years, threw it in a box, never opened it. And that was a huge problem because there were lots of brokerage statements, dividends that all got treated to the state. So just because it's the oldest child and she's an attorney doesn't necessarily mean that's the right person. So trustee problems are the biggest issues that I see. They may not necessarily follow the documents. They may not even follow probate laws in letting everybody know that there's a trust out there. There's notification times and things like that. Other things, I do trust administration. Somebody comes in, they bring all the documents in, none of the accounts are in the name of the trust. The attorney, yeah, Rod is. you know, the attorney normally will set up the documents, do a great job on the plan. They'll take care of the title on the real estate, and then they give the client a certification of trust and tell them take it to the brokers, take it to the banks, and the clients don't. So they just put it on a shelf or in a drawer with the documents and don't look at it. And then all of a sudden, here's this nice trust that has no assets in it, and you end up going into probate if you can't somehow finagle the assets with a Hague staff petition or something like that. So we have those issues. Specific assets, you know, Johnny gets he gets the house, and all of the other beneficiaries divide the brokerage accounts. Well, then the house gets sold to take care of mom and dad because they have some long-term care issues, and then all of a sudden Johnny has nothing. He's disinherited because his asset was gone. So that's another reason to do regular planning and reviewing to make sure that that house is still there. One last thing, sometimes the trustees no longer exist. You know, they a lot of the people have corporate trustees, and we all know that the banks have, you know, the banks have had problems. The trustee departments have either gone under or been picked up by other people. If you have a private fiduciary, you know, that person may die, something like that. So those are all issues after the person dies.
Thank you very much, Marcia. So that leads me into asking you this, Rod.
Okay.
How often should someone update their documents?
Well, that'll depend on how large the estate is and what they've got going on in their lives. We ask our clients if they'll come back to us to, you know, visit with us every 3 years or so. We do offer what's called a maintenance program, and about half of the clients do it, and the other half say, Rod, we'll call you when we need you. But for those who sign up to participate, we would like to do a restatement every 2 to 3 years of the existing planning. We'll capture any new changes in the law. We'll also update the plan to make sure that all the assets are as fully funded into that trust as we can, and we offer unlimited guidance to our clients. We understand, as Marcia has so absolutely spot on pointed out, people are busy, and they simply, unless there is a real reason to do it, they're just not going to get it done. So we understand that. So we work hand in hand with our clients. We offer unlimited guidance, and we stay on them to make sure that the assets are funded. Otherwise, as Marcia's pointed out, you have a nice stack of documents that does you no good. You're not now going to avoid the probate. Why? Because there's nothing in the trust. Everything is outside the trust, and anything owned in the name of the trust maker individually is going to go through probate. And that's not a great result for the reasons we've talked about. So we work extremely hard with our clients to make sure that we see them every 3 years if they'll come back to us. And we think that's valuable because, you know, the world changes, the laws change, and our experience as attorneys changes. I mean, if you can believe it, we actually think we get better as time goes on. We get a little smarter, and we can bring a lot more value to bear to the clients. We learn new techniques, new strategies that can have a real impact in the planning that we do for our clients. So the hope is that we'll see them periodically going forward through the years together. Now, some clients will never come back. We get that. But really, there's no way, and I'm sure Marcia can easily attest to this, there's no way you can write the plan one time to take care of everything for all time. That just doesn't happen in my experience.
Mm-hmm. I couldn't agree with you guys more. I mean, obviously people need to have the review and make changes, you know, when different life events happen, but also coming back to see advisors such as all of you, because your knowledge truly is the value that you bring. And so as laws change and as you gain more experience, it's valuable for them to come back and see you and what more value you can give to them at that time. So Rod, staying on you for the moment, do you have any advice for our viewers on how to go about finding the proper estate planning attorney for themselves?
Sure. Now, we are a devout nation of do-it-yourselfers. So I know that there are people that are listening or watching this and they think, well, you know, I can go to LegalZoom or I can go to Rocket Lawyer, and that's fine. But here's what I would say. in my experience, people don't know what they don't know about the law. So, I would always suggest, would you take out your own appendix? Probably not. You'd probably you'd go see the doctor and have it done, in a hospital. So I say when it comes to doing your estate plan, work with a professional, somebody who, does this area of the law almost exclusively. So there is a great website. Now, our firm belongs to a national group of estate planning attorneys called Wealth Counsel. Now, Wealth Counsel has recently launched a website called estateplanning.com. Great way for someone who's interested, as a result of listening in on the conversation today, to go about finding an estate planning attorney where they live. So just go to estateplanning.com, type it in, and then you can look for an attorney in your local area, and it will give you the names of those advisors that you can meet with. Now, if you don't want to do that, the county bar, well, certainly here in San Diego and probably Riverside, where Marcia is, the county bar associations typically have a lawyer referral service. So if you don't want to go to estateplanning.com, you can go to the lawyer referral service, and they'll give you the contact information for a couple, 3 attorneys. You can meet with them on a complimentary basis, and really at the end of the day, it's who do you resonate with? If the attorney answers your questions and you feel good about working with him or her, then that's probably the person you should work with. Again, I caution our listeners and viewers, don't do this on your own. I mean, it's too important. You don't know, unless you've ever had experience working in a law firm, and even then, that may have been some time ago. The laws have changed. Work with a professional, someone who does this full time, and I think that'll be a much better answer going forward to take care of your family and the concerns that you have. I hope that was helpful.
It was, Rod. Thank you very much. Marcia, do you have any tips or advice for those who are doing estate planning?
Well, the very first one would be find a team to work with you. I think that's really important because the attorney doesn't know the whole picture. The financial person doesn't know the whole picture. The CPA doesn't know the whole picture. So working together, you can find somebody who's going to do the best job for you as the client.
Thank you, Marcia. Sheldon, back to you. Do you have any final tips or advice for those who are considering an estate plan or just starting the process?
First, I've been hearing great recommendations. We all do our best work with our best clients on a strategic level, which involves looking at all facets of their lives. I would encourage people to become invested in the process. Don't be passive. Get into the driver's seat. Ask those. Make it a dinner conversation. Tonight. Think through some of the issues that were discussed, and become better clear on what it is that you want out of your own estate plan. And let the attorney help to guide you. But it's not a matter of just answering his or her questions. It's a matter of, and you certainly don't want to do that while you're on the clock. So, give it some time and thought, and I think that will serve people well. And you know what? If you're not asking those questions of yourselves, or you're not asking those questions of your loved ones, who else is having that conversation with them?
Thank you. So panelists, we actually have a question from the audience. So I'll open this up to all of you. Who do you recommend caregivers and elders seek out for help? Elder law attorney, a CPA, a financial planner, or an estate planning attorney? Knowing who to trust is difficult. This is a direct question from the audience, so I'm opening it up to you.
Well, I'll offer what I think is probably a good recommendation. I would, if it's an elderly parent, I think an elder law attorney, someone who has, got the, who's part of the National Association of Elder Law Attorneys, NALA, I think that would be a good recommendation. But I think what I would also hearken back to, and I think Sheldon and Marcia have both talked about it, but I think it bears repeating again, and that is I think you need to be working in a collaborative fashion. So whether you get an elder law attorney or an estate planning attorney, a CPA or an CPA or a financial advisor, I think it's really valuable to share that information and build a team around the client, because I think, as Marcia pointed out, I as the attorney will only see the legal part of it. I may not understand all the finances they've got, all the accounting that's going on. Sheldon might see, offer some great insight that I would never get, and vice versa, and also with Marcia as well. So hope that helps, especially as we get older as a population. For those elderly parents out there, I think an elder law attorney who has the training and is sensitive to the needs of elderly people, I think is very valuable. Hope that helps.
It does, thank you. And I forgot to say where this question came from, so I apologize, Kathy. This question that I just posed was from Kathy Burkett from Senior Care Corner. Now, would anybody else like to add to that answer?
I think Rod did a really good job in explaining that. The elder care attorneys are, in my area, are really good, and they usually have their own team to help the client.
And I can only add that it depends on what's going on in their lives, the level of complexity, obviously. You mentioned, who can I trust? That's a tough one. Trust doesn't happen in one 60-minute meeting. Trust is something that evolves over time. So I would encourage people to, when they do meet that professional practitioner, to try to feel it out, see who you have a fit with. What relationship do you have in your life where communication really flows? And I think that's a critical component to not only working with someone to come up with an end result, but to maintain that relationship over time.
Thank you, Sheldon. So, there's the expertise in every single panelist's respective profession. And so, viewers, obviously when you need to get this type of planning done, you want to ensure that you're working with a team of advisors that have that level of expertise. But there's also been this theme today with this topic, which is you need to make sure that you're working with an advisor that is willing to go deep into the conversation surrounding these issues, so that way you're truly expressing what it is that you want to have happen, and so that way they can do the proper planning for you based on what your wishes are. And I think that it's really important to not only consider the level of expertise that your advisors on your team have, but also whether or not they're really capable of facilitating these sorts of conversations with you and your family members. And I think that that's often, a facet that we overlook. So when you are out there looking for your advisors, make sure that you take that into consideration. And also, I wanted to let you all know that Marcia, Sheldon, and Rod and myself are actually all a part of another association called Provisors. And so you can get our information through our respective companies, or you can go to the website www.provisors.com. That's www.provisors.com. Now, does anybody else have anything else to add?
No. Thank you.
Okay, I think we're good. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, and a special thank you to my panelists.
Thank you.
Yeah.